Hello everyone, my name is Hailey Elizabeth, and if you don't know who I am, I post videos pertaining to kind of a little bit of whatever I want. Vlogs, conspiracy theories, controversial people, true crime, and all things spooky, scary, skeletons. So if you're into any of that, you can subscribe, and if not, totally chill, totally fine, like no hard feelings. We're just here to have a good time, talk about some true crime, do some makeup. Today we are going to be talking about the case of the Gonzales family. And yes, I took my Christmas tree down, finally. I found the box. If you guys watched my last video, I had my Christmas tree up, and the reason it was up is because I lost the Christmas tree box, like the big box that it goes in. I found it. It was in my garage. So now I have a shoe rack there. So I know you guys were probably like foaming at the mouth, freaking out because I didn't tell you that there was a shoe rack in the corner. But speaking of rearranging things, how about we rearrange the intro a little bit and thank the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Great transition, Hailey. So before getting into the rest of today's video, I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Now, if you guys don't know what Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of different classes varying from whatever you're interested in: business, photography, personal development, art. Something you guys may or may not know about me is that I love to read. At the end of my video, sometimes I'll suggest a book that I'm reading right now, and something that I really do love reading is comic books. Ever since I was a kid, I've always loved reading comic books, collecting comic books, and something that I've always wanted to do was make my own comic books. But I never really thought that I was like talented or like good enough for all of that. I thought it was just gonna be so much work and I didn't know where to start, so I just never did it. But thanks to Skillshare, they actually have a class called Drawing Comics, a beginner's guide, taught by the most talented Ira Marks. This class has taught me so much, and I think it's so well taught. Part of the class, you're actually supposed to make your own comics, and I thought it would be fun to show you what I did before Skillshare, like before I learned anything from the class, and then after I learned stuff from the class. This was before Skillshare. That's supposed to be a bike. Not really sure what I was doing there. This was my comic prior to Skillshare, and then after 1 week of using Skillshare, this is my comic now. Two completely different things. This class, as you can see, has taught me so much about the importance of storytelling, the framing of each panel, how to add details and when to add details. And something that I really like about Skillshare is that it's learning forward, so you don't get any of those annoying ads to break up the flow of your creativity. No matter if you're a beginner, a pro, or just interested, Skillshare has classes for all different types of experience levels. Thanks to Skillshare, they're actually giving the first 1,000 people that click the link in the description box below a 1-month free trial. When you join, you can test out Skillshare's live sessions, meeting different creatives such as yourself, and really feel a part of a community and work alongside other people that are interested in the same things you are. Enter a community of communication, encouragement, and inspiration with the incredible support of fellow creatives. Honestly, as I said, I would have never really done this if it wasn't for Skillshare, and I'm so glad that I was able to, because it was so much fun, and I can definitely see myself doing more of this in the future. And maybe you could even take the comic class yourself, and then we could like do comics together. You can tag me in them, and to do that, you can click the link down below and get your first month free at Skillshare. Again, thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, and now back to your video. Okay, now that that's done. Sorry, no, Skillshare, I love you guys so much. Now we are going to be getting into the case of the Gonzales family. Teodoro Gonzales, aka Teddy, his name was Teddy Gonzales. He was born in 1954 in Baguio, Philippines. He was born into a family of 3 older siblings and his mother and father. Growing up, he didn't really have much money, so in order to get money, he needed to work very hard. Since he didn't really grow up with a lot of money or a lot of opportunities, he always told himself that when he was older, he was going to work very hard to get a lot of money so that his kids don't have to face the financial troubles that he is currently facing. And that's exactly what Teddy did. Teddy graduated high school, and when he did, he later went to college to become a lawyer, and then later on went to law school. So then in 1977, when Teddy was 23, that is when he met the love of his life, Loiva, which, side note, is such a pretty name, Loiva. It sounds like an angel. Loiva was the oldest of 6 children. She was said to be very loving, very maternal, very soft-spoken and shy, but immediately when she met Teddy, they both hit it off. Hit it off so well that after they met, they actually ended up dating, and then they were only dating for a few months until they got married. 3 years later, September 16th of 1980, that is when they had their very first son named Seth. 3 years after that, when Teddy was 29 and Loiva was 24, that is when they had their daughter named Claudine. Loiva and Teddy were the absolute power couple. They did real estate, property development, they had their own video store, they had their own pharmacy, and because of all of this like hard work, they were able to get a lot of money through that, which is exactly what Teddy wanted, because as I said, he didn't grow up with much money, so he wanted to work very hard to make sure that his kids didn't grow up like how he did. On top of all of that, in 1989, they actually bought a plot of land and built their own hotel. The hotel was a 4-story hotel with around 40 bedrooms, and in which the family actually lived at this hotel. Unfortunately, this hotel dream wouldn't last forever, because in 1990, the whole thing unfortunately collapsed due to an earthquake. The Gonzales family was fine, all except Seth. Seth was still stuck inside, but his father actually went in and like risked his life of getting collapsed by all the rubble in order to save his son. In the aftermath, everyone turned out to be okay. Since their home had basically just collapsed, there was really nothing for them to do. They had really nowhere to go. Instead, they just decided to leave the Philippines in general and head off to South Wales, Australia. When they got there, as I said, Teddy was a lawyer, so that is when he decided to open up his own law firm in Australia titled T. Gonzales and Associates. For this firm, he was specifically an immigration lawyer, and with this money that he earned from the firm, he was able to buy a plot of land and build their own family home. The area that they lived in was a very nice suburban area, steering away from the storyline but more into the actual family themselves. Claudine and Steph's relationship with their parents were very, very strict, which is very common among a lot of immigrant parents. They tend to be very strict on their children, have very high expectations. I didn't have these opportunities growing up, so that means that you have to be perfect. There is no reason for you to slack off. When in reality, you know, we're all human, we're all gonna mess up, we're all just trying our best. But I do want to mention that not all immigrant parents are like this. Obviously, there are a lot of parents that are very understanding, that understand that, you know, life is going to be hard no matter where you go. But this is just how specifically the Gonzales parents were. They tended to be very hard on their kids, had very high expectations, but how the Gonzales parents were towards their children does not represent all immigration parents as a whole. I just wanted to say that. Okay, let's go back to the video. But that's how the Gonzales parents were. They expected Seth and Claudine to have perfect grades, have the most perfect friends, be involved in sports and extracurriculars. In this case, they were very strict on their kids, but when their kids would do a good job with something, they would give them rewards. So they were very generous. They bought Seth a car. They bought the kids all the clothes and shoes that they wanted. They even gave the kids an allowance every week so that they didn't have to go to work. They could just focus on their schoolwork. They even had savings for both of the kids for when they graduated college. They were able to get a house, but they would only receive all of this special treatment if they were to do a good job. Now, if the kids stepped out of line, such as, you know, got a bad grade, talked back, lied to them, they would threaten the kids with all of these things that they were giving them. You know, if you do that, I'll take your car away, restrict all of the savings that I have for your house, phone taken away, your clothes, your shoes. Seth, the son, in high school, he went to Parramatta High School, and in high school he was supposed to, you know, be this perfect student, and he really was up until his junior year. That is when he started to slack off a lot. He found a passion for music, and he was really wanting to pursue music, but his parents just saw it as non-realistic and forced him to go into either law or medicine, which Seth obeyed his parents. He ended up going to the University of South Wales for medical science. This college was a very hard college to get into. That is the thing about Seth as well. This school only had like a 30% acceptance rate. So Seth was smart to get in these schools, and he was very smart in general, but he just didn't really see a point in going to school. He didn't really like school. All he wanted to do was spend all of his time on music and something that he's passionate about, and not something that'll just please his parents. As a way to kind of focus himself away from his studies and more onto music, he was actually in this band called Definite Vibes. Pretty small band, but they did have a pretty good sized fan base. There was a lot of like fans that would frequently go to all their shows, and there was specifically this one fan page for Seth ran by this girl named Daisy Diaz. Now, Daisy Diaz was absolutely obsessed with Seth, thought that he was like the most perfect person in the world. She was constantly posting photos of him, and every time they would hang out, she would always refer to him as like her best friend. Like from this fan page, it sounded like she was just obsessed with him, would do anything for him, and loved him. So because of this, you know, his focus off of school and onto this band, he didn't really do that well in college. Seth completely failed his first semester. Obviously, he couldn't tell his parents, so instead he decided to forge his reports and show his parents that he passed first semester when in reality he didn't. And you'll start to see this a lot moving forward. Seth's cockiness and how he believes that he's just so much smarter and sexier and like just so much better than everyone else. He would go to his younger sister Claudine, who was like 16 at the time, and he would brag to Claudine saying like, oh my god, mom and dad are so stupid. They really think that I just passed my first semester in college when in reality I didn't. I failed it. I literally just finessed them. In Claudine's eyes, and deservingly so, she was very frustrated with Seth. She thought that it wasn't fair that she was sitting here losing sleep, trying her best in high school to get the best grade, trying to please her unpleasable parents, while Seth is literally just lying about it, and his parents are like buying him a car, giving him all these gifts for things that he didn't even do. Immediately, there was a lot of tension between Seth and Claudine. They just didn't really, you know, get along for those reasons. Claudine was working her hardest to get the rewards, while Seth was doing the bare minimum and still getting the rewards. After 2 years of doing medical science at South Wales, Seth kind of realized that he didn't want to go into the medical field. He more just wanted to be like his father and go into law. I think it's called Marquette University, but this time major in law. And when he switched his major to law, he immediately like thrived a lot better. He was not only doing law in school, but he was also working as an employee at his father's firm. And because of all of this hard work, as I said earlier about the parents getting Seth a car, the parents actually did get Seth a car. It was a bright blue Toyota with personalized plates that read Seth G80. Claudine at this point, like, she sees Seth getting all away with his shenanigans, and she's kind of, you know, like, what if I went on with a little shenanigan? So that is when she actually had a boyfriend named Charles. Unfortunately, the parents had found out about her boyfriend, and these parents were very, very strict, very religious. They felt like any relationship was going to distract them from their studies, demanded Claudine to stop talking to him, and to ensure that they weren't going to see each other, they sent Claudine from South Wales all the way to Melbourne and sent her to live with an aunt. Although they were separated, they still decided to keep their relationship going and just go long distance. I don't know how, but Seth found out that they were still, you know, dating. Seth, for some reason, decides to get involved, and so he tells Charles, Claudine's boyfriend, Charles should back off of Claudine. You are no good for her, and if you don't back off, I'm in a gang, and we're gonna do gang things, gang activity on you. So Charles was like, oh my god. And so he did. He broke it off with Claudine and was like, oh my god, your brother's in a gang. I don't want to get involved. And Claudine's like, my brother isn't in a gang. And what? Claudine was very, very heartbroken over this and extremely mad at Seth because she just felt like it was not fair that all those years of Seth bragging to her, saying that he finessed his parents, and Claudine kept all those secrets from their parents for Seth, but then as soon as Claudine steps out of line, Seth, like, you know, gets involved and screws it all up for her. Since she's furious, she goes to the parents and tells the parents how Seth actually never passed University of South Wales and actually forged all of these documents to make it look like he was doing a lot better than he was. When the parents found out about this, they were extremely furious with Seth, and they also found out through this argument that Seth himself even had a girlfriend who was 4 years older than him. Again, why is Seth getting involved when he's doing the same exact thing? When they found out about all of this, the parents really didn't do much to Seth except just say that if you don't break up with your girlfriend, we are going to restrict the inheritance from you. Basically, if the parents die, they get a bit large sum of money because of it, like both of the children do. And this inheritance was around $1.4 million. Seth had no choice but to break up with his girlfriend. Because of this, there was a lot of tension between Seth and his parents. Later on, the girlfriend at this time actually said that her and Seth weren't even really officially dating. They kind of just like saw each other a couple of times, but that was it. They never made anything official. Seth was saying things like, oh, I'm in love with her. He even gave her an engagement necklace, while the girlfriend, quickly after they broke up, she just went back to her ex and like moved on from Seth. Seth, you'll start to see going on, loves to lie. He loves to tell stories. Whenever he was at his shows, it was said that he would say lies such as, right now I'm a model and I'm a lawyer and I'm like a music producer. He even told a bunch of people that he was a part of Calvin Klein Asia, which was completely a lie. He just felt like he was so above everyone else, and at this point there was not only tension between Seth and his parents because his parents made him break up with his girlfriend. They were threatening to take all these things away, but there was also tension between Seth and his sister because his sister ratted him out for this entire thing in the first place. On July 10th of 2001, the day started out pretty normal. The parents went to work that morning. Seth went to school. During this point, Claudine was actually at the house. She wasn't in Melbourne because she was on a school holiday. Seth went to school, and then after school, he went to go to work at his father's firm. Later on that night, Seth actually had plans with his friend named Sam Delio. They were planning to go out to dinner in an arcade that night around 5 p.m. Around 5 p.m. rolls around, and that is when Seth calls Sam and tells him that he unfortunately has to take a little rain check. So their plans got postponed from 5 p.m. to 8. 8 p.m. that is when Seth went to go pick up Sam from his house, and then afterwards they went to Planet Hollywood for dinner, and then afterwards went to a nearby arcade. Ended up staying out until about 11. Around 11:45 is when Seth came home, and when he walked through the door, he was confronted with the bodies of his mother, father, and sister. His father was found all bloodied in the foyer, his mother was found in the living room, and his sister was found in the bedroom, all stabbed to death. At 11:48, that is when Seth called the police crying hysterically, saying that someone had broken into the house. So whilst he was on the phone with the police, obviously a horrific scene like this, he's hysterical, he's freaking out. That is when he goes outside and he starts screaming for help. He gets the attention of two neighbors because at this point it was kind of like thunderstorming outside, so it was a little bit loud. These neighbors were able to calm down Seth. Whilst in his hysteria, he actually remembered, like, oh my god, I went to school for medical science, I know CPR. So he runs back in the house, he goes to do CPR on his father, but then he realizes it's just a lost cause, so he runs back outside. And when he runs back outside, that is when the ambulances and the police officers show up. Teddy was stabbed 12 times along with defensive wounds on his body, meaning that whilst he was being stabbed, he was trying to defend himself from the killer. Loiva was found in the living room with grocery bags all around her, kind of as if she had came home with groceries, and that is when she was attacked and things just went flying all over the place. She was stabbed multiple times in the face, arms, and chest, along with defensive wounds all over her body. As far as the sister Claudine, hers was the most brutal out of all of them. She was again stabbed multiple times in her torso, her face, her arms. She was lying in a fetal position as if she was just trying to as if she was curled up and crying as if it was happening, which is so, oh my God. But on top of her was a red jumper. Whoever did this tried to cover up how brutal it was with a red sweater. That's how she was found up in her room. The autopsy showed that Claudine was also suffered from head trauma. They're suspecting that she was hit with a baseball bat beforehand. Claudine was suspected to have passed away at 4 p.m., the mother at 6 p.m., and the father, Teddy, at 6:20 p.m. When examining the crime scene further, they actually found some racist graffiti on the walls with blue spray paint. Immediately after seeing this, the police assumed that this was a racially motivated crime. This made the news. Everybody was talking about it. When Seth was talking to the police, said that when he came home that night, he actually saw 2 people run away from the house. Afterwards, the police were trying to say okay, well, do you know who those 2 people could have been? Do you have any suspects? That is when Seth brings up a incident that happened the night before where the family was in the car after Claudine just had her 18th birthday dinner. Yes, this was the day after Claudine's 18th birthday. They got into a very heated road rage incident with another person, and this person ended up saying a lot of really racist remarks to them. Seth was like, maybe it was them, maybe they figured out where we lived. So because of this, the police assumed that it in fact was a racially motivated crime. They investigated the area, and a lot of the area was very rummaged through. The mom's purse, the father's briefcase, it was all open with stuff hanging all over the place as if someone was looking for something, but barely nothing was stolen. The phone cord was cut. The family also had 5 dogs. The 5 dogs were not harmed at all in this situation. They were just thrown into the laundry room and they were kept there while all of the crimes were going on. After investigating the crime scene further, they determined that this was not a robbery but a staged robbery. They felt like the groceries that was laying around Loiva just looked way too meticulously put. It didn't seem natural. The father's briefcase was rummaged through, but the father's wallet was left untouched. There was $700 in his wallet as well as $300 just lying on Claudine's dresser. All of the jewelry that the mother owned was completely fine. You could tell that this was more racially motivated than financially motivated. There was also a broken kitchen window, as if someone had purposely broken the kitchen window, but over the window there was a sink and there was no footprints on the sink. This just looks like someone purposely from the inside broke the kitchen window to make it look like that was their passage of entry. Also determined that it was very odd that the weapons, they found 2 missing knives from the kitchen block. Then they went online and they found the same exact kitchen block. They found the same exact knife that was missing from the kitchen block and realized that same knife matched up with the stab wounds in all 3 of the bodies, meaning that whoever did this stole the knives from the kitchen block. This was another really odd piece of information because, as I said, Claudine died at 4 and then the mom died at 5 and then the father died at 6:20. This killer was clearly very patient. They wanted to kill everyone in the family. So if they were looking to kill everyone in the family, why wouldn't they wait for Seth as well? Why would they be so patient but not prepared? This scene, is looking a little sus on Seth. So they talked to Seth. He says that he woke up, he went to school, and then after school he went to go work with his dad. He said that day he was working late at the firm, so he had to postpone plans with his friend Sam until 8. He also says that he actually got off of work around 6:30, but when he went into the driveway, he was contemplating going inside the house, but he never actually went inside of the house because it was raining really bad. As for his whereabouts during this time period, he says that he was going to a friend's house named Wrath. When the police spoke to Rath said that he didn't really talk to Seth that much. Seth didn't even have his address or his phone number. Seth didn't know that, so he was just telling the police that he went to go to Rath's house, but then he never did, and then he just drove around until 8 p.m., and then that's when he picked up his friend Sam. Now, due to security footage at Planet Hollywood as well as the arcade, they were able to confirm Seth's whereabouts during that time period, but as far as his whereabouts during the actual murder, he could not have an alibi for. Although the police were getting very suspicious onto Seth, they didn't want to execute on anything just yet. So whilst all of this was going on, that is when Seth decided to hold a press conference. Very emotional. He was crying. He was saying like, please, anyone, if you have any information, we're offering $100,000 reward to find the killer.
Ask anyone out there to please help us.
And then literally after that, he goes to the accountant and asks for his inheritance. By the way, this is 2 days after he just saw his whole family stabbed to death. He has the energy to walk up into his accountant's office and ask for $1 million in inheritance, which, by the way, he would be the sole collector of because Claudine is dead. So since he's the only remaining family member, he receives all of it. Obviously, he was declined this inheritance. Whilst all of this was going on, since he did go public with this information, it did open the floor for a lot of people to be speculating on what happened. A lot of people speculated that possibly the father Teddy was involved with crime-related activities. It was also made known that in the late 90s, Teddy was put onto trial for helping people lie on their citizenship documents to get like quicker citizenship for immigrants from the Philippines, but he was later, you know, dropped from all charges. So a lot of people were thinking that possibly he was involved in some really shady stuff that ended up in the murder of his family, but it also doesn't make sense. If you're gonna kill the whole family, why would you leave Seth unharmed? This claim was also backed up by a colleague of Teddy's. A colleague of Teddy's had told the police that one day he saw Teddy on the phone very, very angry, which was very odd because typically Teddy isn't really an angry person, but he was furious with this other person on the phone. He was screaming at this person in Tagalog, meaning that it was probably a person from the Philippines, and all of a sudden he said, F you, and then he hung up the phone, and then his colleague was like, what is that about? Basically, there was just some property development issues in the Philippines, and this guy got so mad that he threatened to kill his family, which he thought was just a hollow threat. But now that the colleague is starting to connect the pieces, he's like, what if it wasn't a hollow threat? Like, what if that person in the Philippines actually had someone like hire for his family to be killed? Now, other than that guy's word, that is the only piece of evidence that is supportive of this claim that Teddy was involved in some really shady stuff. July 13th of 2001, 3 days after the murder, Seth goes back to the accountant and says, hey, remember me? Can I get that inheritance now? Obviously, the accountant is like, no. It was $1.3 million in inheritance plus a $1.5 million in Australia estate because, as I said, they did a lot of real estate and property development, so they also had a lot of money through that. Once again, he was denied, which thank God. Like, why? Why do you even care about getting money right now? And like, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, well, he probably just needed money to survive. The government gave him $50,000. Typically, when you come to situations like that, like for young people, if your whole family passes away, whether it be a house fire, a car accident, in Australia, you are given a $50,000 compensation. So you're not just like homeless and you can get back up on your feet again. So that is what he was given. So financially, he was fine right now. For some reason, he just really, really wanted that inheritance. Hold on. I'm gonna close the window because it's a little too bright in here. Does that look better? Oh, that looks so much better. June 20th of 2001 rolls around, and that is actually the day of the funeral. So at the day of the funeral, there was over 200 attendees to this funeral. It was not just like close family members and friends that knew about this. It was also a lot of the public. At the actual funeral, when everybody is visiting his parents and his sister, Seth has the opportunity to go up and say a little something about his family. Very, very emotional. It's very, you know, heart to heart. It's kind of the same one that he gave at the press conference, but at the end of his speech, after talking about like his dead family for about 20 minutes, he thus ends it off with a Mariah Carey song.
We'll be together one sweet day.
It would make more sense if he sung a song that was like very meaningful to the family, like maybe a very popular Tagalog song or something very traditional, something very respectful. But One Sweet Day by Mariah Carey, when he was done, everyone in the audience was like, yeah, he just like ended it off with a musical number and then left, and everyone was so confused. A lot of people to this thought that it was very sweet and kind that he would sing a little song, but other people like me were very confused because it was not a shared like loved family song. He just busted out a Mariah Carey musical number and then left. After that, the police like obviously started to look a little bit more into Seth. So the police were continuously asking Seth a lot of questions, trying to get more information, which Seth grew very aggravated with the police that they kept on talking to him, which, my God, the police dare bother him in his time of mourning. Get a hold of yourself, man. Like, this is your family. After the whole funeral, Seth was invited back into the police station where he gave his statement again. And then when the police asked him, well, if these killers were looking to kill your entire family, why do you think they left you alone? And to this, Seth replied that he believes that he was left alone because the killers probably left Seth alone so that when the killers left, the police would have no other suspects besides Seth, and Seth would go down for their crimes. Also didn't really help that from 4:30 to 7 p.m. where like the crimes had actually taken place, Seth didn't have anyone to account him for that. The only people that actually saw Seth that day besides his school, his work, or his family was Sam. When they were questioning Sam about this entire investigation, there were a few odd things that were going on that night. Apparently, Seth kept on trying to call his family's house, but every time he would call, the line would just go dead because the phone cord was cut. Sam said that Seth kept on asking to borrow his phone multiple times during the night. Sam actually suggested to Seth, hey, why don't we go and drive past your house, see if everything's okay, and then that'll give you a little bit of peace of mind. Seth would get very mad and say, it's fine, let's just, forget about it. But then 15 minutes later, asked Sam again if he could call his family. Sam also said that at that night when they were having dinner at Planet Hollywood, he really wasn't touching his food at all. But other than those two things, he was completely fine. Like, he was making jokes, he was having fun. Because at this point, they have ruled out that this was not a racially motivated robbery gone wrong. This was definitely planned. This was patient, and this was, something that was very personal. As I said, most of the stab wounds was to the face and arms and neck. In a lot of like murder cases, you'll see that whenever it's a personal crime, there are many stab wounds to the face. A good example of this is the Lizzie Borden axe murderer case. Lizzie Borden, she had a lot of hatred to her mother and her father, and when they were found dead, there was a lot of axe hits to the face specifically because there was a lot of passion there. That's kind of what this crime looked like. It looked like it was personal. This was just Seth. It's really messed up because Seth, he so clearly did it, but he was putting the racially motivated crime stamp on it to make people feel sorry for him, when in reality, it was just him, which is so manipulative. It's so disgusting. It's so wrong because there are so many people that are victims of these racially motivated crimes, but they don't really get much attention. And the fact that Seth used that as like kind of a way to gain sympathy from people is extremely disgusting. And yeah, so at this point, the police knew that it was Seth who did it. They just needed actual evidence to point it against him, and enough evidence in order to arrest Seth. So they started asking surrounding neighbors what they heard that night, if there was any fighting, screaming. As I said, it was thunderstorming that night, so a lot of like neighbors said, I didn't hear anything. All I heard was like lightning and thunder, so there really wasn't much going on. Although there were two across the street neighbors that said during that time period of 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., they saw Seth's car in the driveway. And this was Seth's car because, as I said, Seth had personalized license plates. Teddy's colleague said that he actually went over to the house like during that day around 5 p.m. He was just there to drop some things off in the mailbox, and when he did drop off those things, he saw Seth's car in the driveway. One of the biggest witnesses that they have during this investigation is Loiva's sister Emily, aka Seth's aunt. Seth's aunt Emily said that around 6 p.m. she showed up to the house because she was picking up her son from school and just wanted to pay her sister a visit. But when she went there, she didn't see Loiva's car in the driveway, but she did see Seth's. So she was like, okay, well, you know, if Loiva or Teddy isn't here, Claudine and Seth is clearly here, so I'll just pay them a visit. She goes to the front door and she knocks on the door and she hears absolutely nothing, which is insane because, as I said, they have 5 dogs. So you would think that, you know, just one tap of the door and the dogs, at least one of them, is going crazy. But she knocked on the door and not one dog barked. She heard absolutely nothing, no rummaging. She knocked again. She rang the doorbell and she looked through the window and she could have sworn she saw someone with a big coat and a baseball cap. The son just kind of played it off as like, oh, mom, you're just being over dramatic. It was just a coat rack. It's fine. Like, let's just go. Emily decides to go around to the side of the house and go to the side door. But when she did, she said that in this moment, she got a very uneasy and eerie feeling in her stomach and kind of something in her telling her she needs to get out of there. So immediately she takes her son, she gets in her car and she drives off. And that was the end of that. Emily, even to this day, contemplates like what would have happened to her if she were to actually get into the house. During the actual questioning of this entire event, when Seth was, you know, crying hysterically on the phone, when he was saying this story, it just looked like as if he was just making crying sounds, but no tears were coming out. They also took Seth's clothes from that night as well, the ones that he was wearing. Remember when I said that Seth went back into the house to perform CPR? His father was in a pool of blood, so you would think that Seth probably got a lot of blood on his clothes. After examining his clothes did not have that much blood on them as you would think that like after kneeling in a pool of blood would. Seth's explanation for this is so stupid. He says that after he did CPR and he realized it was a lost cause, he went back outside in the rain and the rain just like washed all the blood off of his clothes, which blood does not just wash off, like it stains when it's on there. It just made no sense. And also on Seth's clothes, on the sleeve of his jacket, they found a little speck of blue paint. The same blue paint that was used to write that racial slur on the wall. Now, this was a huge piece of evidence that was against Seth, and finally the police were getting somewhere with trying to gain enough evidence to be able to arrest Seth. So then he goes back the next day and he tells the police, okay, so I'm sorry, I lied, but this is actually where I was. I was just scared to admit it before, but I actually went to a brothel by the name of La Petite Aroma. And he basically like explained the story. He said, I went there after work and I'm ashamed of it. That's why I never mentioned it. And the reason why my car was at the house is because I actually took a taxi to and from there because this man, like, literally give me a break. They were like, why would you take a taxi and not your actual car? He said that there was a sex worker there that was obsessed with him and that every time he would like go in and do business with her, she would ask him not to pay her because the sex was too good. Please, someone humble this man. That was his reasoning by taking a taxi. But he was like, yeah, and if you ask the sex worker that works there and you ask the taxi driver, like, they are my alibis, they will tell you that I was there at this time. They go to the brothel and the sex worker that they were like talking to, this guy Seth, said that he was here this day. Is that true? The sex worker is like, no, that's not true, but I'll give you a better story. Seth called me yesterday and said, hey, the police are coming there tomorrow. Can you cover for me? I'll give you $50. Obviously, she says yes and takes the money, but she still like says to the police, no, he was not here. He actually called me and gave me $50. And so the police were like, that's what we thought. So then they bring in the taxi driver. Now the taxi driver says, yes, that is true. I did take him to a brothel. Okay, just so you know, he's actually involved in a triple homicide investigation. So if you lie to us, this is also on you too. And immediately when the taxi driver heard that, he changed up his story and told the truth. Seth did the same thing to the taxi driver as he did to the sex worker. He paid him $50 to cover for him. Seth had told the taxi driver that it was a minor offense and it was nothing serious, so that is why he decided to cover for him. But once he realized it was a triple homicide investigation and not a minor offense like shoplifting, he decided not to cover for him and just tell the police everything they wanted to know. Now, it was also said that 3 days after the murder, as I said, he was trying to get his inheritance. From further investigation, it turned out that he just expected that his inheritance would kick in at some point. $50,000 that he got from the state, he used that money to put a $5,000 deposit down on a $173,000 Lexus car. And then after that, he told like the car company that he would just give them the money when the inheritance kicked in. Obviously, the inheritance never kicked in, so he had to return the Lexus. To make it even like worse is that on the Lexus, he got personalized plates in memory of his family. Very disrespectful. Again, it would make more sense if it was more meaningful. Like, oh yeah, my family all loved cars. That's why I'm doing this for them. But no, he just wanted to buy a Lexus and then was like, but I'm getting it for my family because look at the little license plate. I spent $50 on a license plate. It just seems like he really had no remorse for anything. He was just so worried about getting money and looking good rather than like actually mourning the death of his family. It also came out that a few days after the murder, he was pawning off both of his parents' cars as well as all of his mother's jewelry and made around $68,000 off of it. This shows absolutely no remorse. Literally, if your whole family dies, you're not going to give away anything that they own. If anything, you're going to keep every single little thing because it's like every single little thing is a memory of them. You're not going to go out and pawn all of the memories that you have of your mother. You're going to keep them. Victims of these situations keep the house exactly the same. They don't touch anything. They don't sell anything. So this was a huge red flag to police because it really showed that Seth really had no remorse for what happened to his family. He was more obsessed with himself and materialistic items than he was with like actually finding justice for his family. When the police started talking to Seth's family in the Philippines, that is when the police later on found out that Seth is a complete pathological liar. He, as I said, would lie about a lot of things. He told his family in the Philippines that he had cancer and then he beat cancer, which is a lie. There was another point where he needed a like specific life-threatening surgery and he asked his family in the Philippines if they could send him $193,000. The family, thank God, didn't give him the money, but he said that he needed it for his life-threatening condition, which again, the parents had all this money. If they really did need that money, the parents just would have put out the money and give it to him. Family in the Philippines also said that he would lie about his jobs as well. He would say that he was a movie producer and a music producer, and a lawyer and a model. And there were also times, which I think is so insane, he would get caught with stealing money. And when his parents would confront him about like, why did you steal money from us? He would use the excuse that he was an opportunist. So he would literally just steal money from his parents and then be like, I'm an opportunist. Sorry. It was later on revealed as well that fan account ran by Daisy. Yeah, that fan account was ran by him. They found it on his computer. All those things that he was saying about like him being super nice and sweet and kind and amazing. Yeah, that was all him. In August of 2001, at this point, for some reason, I don't know why, Seth is still not arrested for this crime, but Seth did go to the police saying that he received this anonymous email all in English/Tagalog, basically saying that the people in the Philippines only paid for 3 kills and he's just lucky he wasn't home. When he showed this email to the police, looked through his computer and found 3 drafts of this email, meaning that Seth had basically just sent the email to himself. So again, like, no one was threatening him. In October of 2001, Seth did not know this, but his phone was actually bugged by the police. One day, an undercover cop tried to stage a conversation at a coffee shop that Seth was at. So this undercover cop goes up to Seth and is like, hey, I like your outfit. And then through that, they started talking. And the undercover cop actually told Seth, like, hey, I actually just got out of jail because I did all this time. I'm in a gang. And Seth replies, oh yeah, that's crazy because I'm in a gang too. We're called the White Dragons. Sounds more like a band name. Yeah, he said that he was we call ourselves the White Dragons. What is this, Twilight? Basically, he tells, and I don't know why he was not arrested right at this moment. He was like, someone killed my family and I don't know who, and they're pinning it on me. And then the undercover police officer is like, hey, I actually know a guy in prison that's like on death row right now. I could just like let him know. He'll be more than welcome to go down for all of your crimes. If you just give me some information about it, I can relay that information onto him to make it look more believable. Seth pulls out a piece of paper and starts to map out the floor plan of his house and tell this undercover police officer, which he didn't know was a police officer, exactly where the bodies were, how many stab wounds there were, where the stab wounds are at, and also the time of death. This piece of information was very crucial because the only people that knew the time of death was the police officers and the killer. A huge piece of information pointing him to the crime. I, once again, don't know why he wasn't arrested on the spot. He mentioned that there was graffiti on the walls, and so Seth wrote down on this piece of paper what the graffiti on the wall said, and when they matched that handwriting to the handwriting on the wall, it was eerily similar. A couple days later, Seth actually called this undercover cop and said that, you know, it's not a good idea. I don't want your friend going down for this. I'll just find someone else, and basically just backed out of the entire thing. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention this. So with all of the money that he was getting from pawning off his dead family's items, he was also staying in luxury apartments that his extended family was paying for these apartments. Even though he had the money to pay for it himself, pay money out of sympathy for him, saying that the police officers told him that he needs to be in all of these like high-class luxury apartments because they have the best security and he needs to be very safe during this hard time. The family later found out that the police said no such thing like that, and he was basically just scamming his family to pay all of his rent for him so he didn't have to pay it himself. May 30th of 2002, that is when he filed a police report saying that someone broke into his apartment. The police got there. They quickly realized that it did not look like a break-in, but more of a staged break-in. He said that he also received 3 really shady emails saying that, threatening him. And when he showed these emails to the police traced the emails back to an internet cafe, but there was no security cameras at the internet cafe, so they couldn't really prove that Seth is the one who wrote those emails. So then later on that day, because this all happened in the morning, so during the day, he was actually... This is another thing. When he would do interviews with the press, he would require them to pay him to be on their show. If he were to be on Oprah, he would have Oprah pay him to get his story about his family, because it's like, if you really wanted justice for your family, you would put your story out there for free. You wouldn't require a fee to talk about it. Later on that day, he spoke with a reporter, and then afterwards, later on that night, he was actually found with a bag over his head by like a random civilian. So this person took him to the hospital, and at the hospital, he says that on his way home from doing that interview, he said that someone drove up in a car, banged his head over with a panel of wood, put a bag over his head, and told him that if he goes to another reporter, he will be the next to die alongside his grandmother. When the police heard this, they were very, very scared because they knew that Seth was capable of killing 3 people. Not be crazy to think that Seth might even kill his grandmother to make a point or just to deflect any blame that is on him. And another thing as well is that when the police got there and they started talking to Seth, Seth seemed to be very dissociative. He woke up and he didn't know his name. He didn't know where he was. When the doctors did an exam on him, they found that there was no trauma to the head, meaning that whole story that Seth said, how someone hit him over the head with a wooden panel, that just did not happen because they would have seen some sort of head trauma. And considering that he had no illness or like wounds due to this whole incident, there was no reason for him to be dissociative or forget his name or where he was. So he was basically just putting on this whole theatrical performance again for more sympathy. Going back to like the grandmother, how this person threatened that they would kill the grandmother if he went back to the reporters. The police felt very scared for the grandmother, so to prevent any more murders happening, they compiled all the evidence that they had thus far, and they had just amount of evidence to arrest him. So on June 13th of 2002, that is when Seth was arrested on the 3 accounts of murder. He of course pled not guilty to the 3 accounts of murder, and when he was asked if he could access his inheritance for his defense, he was again refused the inheritance. April of 2004, 2 years of waiting for his trial, that is when he finally decided to confess to the murders. He said that this murder was actually months in the making. They actually found that Seth, just a couple months earlier, actually bought a seed that is very, very poisonous once ingested. So he said that instead of stabbing his family, he was actually just going to poison them instead. He said that he wasn't going to kill them all at once either. He was just going to slowly do it one by one. He decided to start off with his mother, and his mother actually got such bad food poisoning from this that she ended up having to get hospitalized for it. The doctors didn't really know what it was. They just kind of pawned it off as really, really bad food poisoning, but the mother did survive from this incident. Seth realized that he could not actually use this poison because it wasn't going to work 100%. They actually searched his apartment as well a while later, and when they were searching his apartment, they actually found a vial of this clear liquid that was later determined to be poison taped underneath his desk. Why he kept that, I don't know. A lot of the investigators were thinking that maybe he was going to use this on his grandmother, as I said, to prove a point or deflect any blame off of him. And then when he was taken into custody, he had to do a fingerprint test, and when he was doing the fingerprints, his fingerprints did not match up with like any at the scene because obviously it was his house, so you're going to find fingerprints there of his anyway. But his fingerprints did match up with a crime that was committed a couple months ago that they didn't even know that he had anything to do with. Basically, back in early July of 2001, 3 different food distributors received 3 different letters basically from an angry person saying that they had snuck into their warehouse and contaminated a bunch of their product with poison, and that product is now on shelves in grocery stores, and that is what they get for mistreating their employees. For that letter, they found fingerprint matches of that letter to Seth's fingerprints, meaning that Seth did this crime. So I explained that part very bad, so I'm gonna re-explain it right now. As I said, this crime was months in the making, and his original plan was to poison his whole family, but it would look very odd if the whole entire family got poisoned except for Seth. There would need to be a reasoning for the poison. So what he did was he faked a letter and sent it out to 3 food distributors saying that they poisoned their food that is now on the shelves as revenge because of the way that they mistreat their employees. So then when Seth's family turns up dead, he could just blame it on this like whole, poisonous food warehouse situation rather than pointing it to him. How he was going to execute on all of that, I don't know, because wouldn't it be kind of odd if his family was the only one affected by this? And then it would also be odd that Seth even knew about it in the first place. So on the day of the actual murder, what they believed happened, he actually went to class that day because they spoke to his teachers at the university and they did confirm that he was in class that day. And afterwards, they spoke to the people at the law firm and said, yes, he actually was here that day. But supposedly he came home at around 4:30 p.m. and he had a baseball bat in the trunk of his car. So he took the baseball bat out the trunk of his car, went inside the house, banged his little sister over the head with the baseball bat, took 2 kitchen knives and started stabbing her to death. After this, again, that was like his little sister, so they're assuming that he probably felt very ashamed or bad for what he did. So that is why they think that he covered her up with a red blanket. You know how like sometimes on a murder scene when someone is dead, they cover them up with a blanket out of respect. That's what's believed that he did, but with like a red jacket. 5 p.m. that is when, remember how I said the aunt had came by and she was ringing the doorbell, knocking on the door, and the mysterious man with the jacket and baseball cap, that was actually Seth. After the aunt left a while later at around 6 p.m. that is when Loiva came home and he murdered Loiva in the living room, and then around 7 p.m. murdered his father right when he walked in the door. As I said, at this time it was like thunderstorming. A lot of the screams and the talking was kind of muffled out by the sound, so that's why the neighbors couldn't hear anything. After he had killed all 3 of his family members, he realized that he needed a reason for this crime. Like, there is no way that a random person would just walk in and kill a whole family with absolutely no reason. So that is when he decided to write the racial slurs on the wall to give this crime some sort of motive. And then he also started rummaging through his parents' things to make it look like it was a robbery as well. Afterwards, he just left the crime look exactly how it was because he needed it to look like a crime scene, but it didn't look crime scene-y. So that is when he decided to stage it with the groceries around. He started to make it look all like perfect with the rummaging of the things, and he also broke the kitchen window to make it look like a robbery. Afterwards, he took a shower, got in his car, and picked up his friend Sam. Went to an arcade and hung out with his friend Sam after he just murdered his entire family, which is so dark. May 24th of 2004, that is when the actual trial had started. He was found guilty on 3 accounts of murder of his mom, his father, and his sister. They dropped the charges on suspicion of contamination. As I said, he was the one who wrote and sent out those letters. He also met with a psychologist to see if he was fit to stay on trial, and he did not suffer from any mental illnesses. As for now, he stays in the Goldberg prison on 3 accounts of murder, so that's 3 life sentences with no possibility of parole, and even to this day he pleads innocence. He still believes that he did not do this. There is someone out there, his murderer is out there, and like someone else did this crime and it was not him. The aftermath, in November of 2005, that is when a new family had bought the house, which a lot of people thought was like crazy because a whole family had been murdered in that house. They just thought that they would probably burn it down or something, and they refrained from speaking to any of the press because, you know, they were just a normal family moving into a house. And then in 2017 they came out with a statement. They basically just said that they bought the house because they really liked the house, and they are aware that people had died there, but they say that, you know, it's in the past and their souls have moved on, and they think that if the family was still alive today, they would be very grateful that their house is being very taken care of. So that's basically where the family is right now. As I said, Seth is in prison even to this day currently, where he still pleads innocence, and he is in there for the rest of his life. That is basically the end of today's story. I hope you guys found this interesting, and if you did, give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe. Personally, I agree with the court. I do believe he is guilty. I don't think he's innocent. There is just way too much evidence to prove that he had done what he had done. If he really did care about justice for his family, why would he ask some random stranger to take the fall instead of still like searching for the killer that's still out there? It seemed like he just wanted this to go away as quick as possible. Either he did it or he didn't do it and he's just a really terrible person. Either way, he's a terrible person. But that's basically it for today's video. I went for, I don't even know what this is. This hat. It's the New York Yankees. I love it so much. I wear it every single time my hair is greasy, like today. Not really many updates. I'm still watching Sex and the City. Oh my god, I watched this one show on Netflix. It's called Stay Close. What a bad show. I'm sorry, but I don't like that show. It was made by the creators of The Stranger, and even with The Stranger, like, I was into it, but I wasn't really into it. They were very known for, like, having bad episodes, but having really crazy plot twists at the end of every episode that makes you want to watch the second one, if that makes sense. It's kind of bad throughout all of it, and then towards the end you're confronted with a huge plot twist that makes you just want to go to the next episode, and that's basically what that show is. I'm not done with it yet. I still got like 2 more episodes, but so far I just don't like it. I think the screenwriting is really cliche. The storyline is like very confusing too. Basically it's about this girl who was a stripper in her past life, but then she almost killed her boyfriend, so then she had to run away and start a new life. And then in this new life, turns out the boyfriend that she thought she had killed isn't actually dead and is coming to find her to kill her. And so that's the premise of the show. Sounds very interesting, right? If only they would have executed it better. That's basically the whole premise of the show. But in the beginning, it's so odd because they never tell you that she attempted to kill her boyfriend and that's why she ran away. It just seemed like, oh yeah, in my past life, I was a stripper, and that's why this is all taboo, and that's why I need to keep the secret down low. Like, who cares if you were a stripper? Like, I don't know. She already has like a husband and 3 kids. But yeah, that's all from me. So with that being said, do something that makes you happy today.